Hello, everyone. Welcome back to No Bull with Nobu, the All-American Shaman. Today, we're going to continue our journey up the chakras. We started with some diet at the root and the base foundation, and now the next one up is the sexual energy chakra. So, Nobu, maybe you can get us started talking about how you view it yourself, the power and the potentials that are included in our sexual energy center.
Yes, and thank you again for having me, JT, and doing this. So the sacral chakra, the Svadhisthana in Hindu, is the second chakra up from the spine, and it is orange, and it is responsible for creative or sexual or sacral slash sacred energy. And I was very intentional in my words that I used in the order I used, kind of connect some dots, right? Because when we think of sexual energy, a lot of people, I know at least for myself, when I was in the matrix, as it were, thought of sexual energy purely as sexual. That was like your libido, right, was only related to how horny you were and your desire to procreate or engage in sex event or pleasure of any kind. But it goes far beyond that. As I stated, creative, sacral, sacred. So it is the act of creation, whether that be for the male with, the semen and the testicles and the penis, or for the female with the ovaries, uterus, and vagina. These different areas are also the birthplace of life, the seat of creation. So, which is why sex is sacred. So, to go into your question more as far as how it relates to my shamanic work, a lot of what I encounter are a lot of energy cords back to the sacral chakra. And people are then being drained of their energy and that creative sexual life force, and they're unable to manifest things or create things, whether that be create artistically, right? That's also creativity. Whether that be unable to produce a child, infertility, sterile, or just in general, unable to have the energy to move through life, where they're just feeling very bleh, again, lacking libido, lacking life force.
Right. Can we take a quick tangent on energy cords? I think we may have brought up that term in previous episodes, but not sure if we've actually defined it. Could you kind of talk through what are energy cords?
Yes. So going back to, I believe it was our first episode, talking about the unseen and the realm in which the shaman operates. So there are different layers of reality, okay, all within your awareness, but perhaps not your immediate perception. And cords can be created between us and other people, places, and things via a myriad of ways. And it's quite limitless. At a very soft, gentle level, you walk down the street and you make eye contact with someone. That could create an energy cord. Again, the eyes are the windows to the soul. So just even that brief, fleeting glance can spark a connection. Whereas something more intense would be having a heated argument with someone. That can create hooks and energy cords between the two of you, and that seat of anger. Again, where tension goes, energy flows. So, people who find themselves ruminating on a conversation in the shower, right? Like, oh, I should have said this. They still have a connection. They're hooked by that interaction, and thus that person is living rent free in their head, or rather, I would say their energy field. And even more intense level would be sexual partners. And this, the coincidence, I just dropped my rock there. This is how I actually got into shamanism. Like what drove me to consciously become a shaman was an extremely traumatic sexual event for me. Because when we are what we eat, the music to which we beat, and with whom we sleep. So when you have sex with someone, that creates a very, very, very strong cord. It's been said in some of the yogic practices that, with whom you sleep stays with you for 7 years. And this checks out by my logic, understanding, again, science knows it takes 7 years for the human body to completely do a new regeneration of cells from head to toe. So again, you are a new person every 7 years in that cycle of autophagy and senescent cell removal. ideally, right? So in the process of coitus, there is an exchange of data. And you even touched on this last week with the food, right? That food holds information, that nutrition, the quality of data and information. And again, we become cellularly, as dense matter, what we eat. And furthermore, again, the consciousness we touched on last week. So sexual partners are just as intense as that, right? When you are allowing yourself entry or someone else entry into your vessel in that, very intimate, sacred way, there's a strong exchange of information. I will go into briefly how I experienced this in a negative context. There was a woman I ended up sleeping with who I knew to be polygamous, and but I did not know how many partners she had or who her partners were. And after I laid with her, I started having visions and memories and cravings for drugs and foods that I hadn't eaten or had conscious, intimate, personal experience with, right? Because again, it creates all these chords. So, like, I create a chord with her, which then goes back to everyone else for the past 7 years, if there hasn't been cleansing going on. And this experience caused me to go through a Britney Spears type scenario where I shaved my face, shaved my entire body. I had to, because hair stores psychic energy as well, and I had to just do a hard reset. And it took me about 2 years to recover from this. It nearly broke me. It damn near broke me. And again, where I couldn't get her out of my head. I was constantly, like, obsessed. And this also goes back to some other things we'll talk about in the future, like incubus and succubus and Jezebel type spirits. But going back to the sexual energy component as well, pardon my phrasing here, but the only thing worse than a bloodsucker is a cocksucker, because it takes 40 drops of blood to produce 1 drop of semen. And the cultivation of sexual energy is paramount. So there's more I can say, but is there anything you want me to dive in deeper from what I said there?
Yeah, maybe we could you mentioned the 7 years to remove cords. Is that like if you don't do any sort of intentional active cleansing yourself?
Correct. Yeah, it's going to take 7 years for your body to just kind of naturally get itself back to homeostasis after that interaction.
And if one side cuts the cord, so to speak, does the other side also have it cut? Does it both, do both sides need to like remove it, or?
Nope. So, and I'm glad you asked that question, because oftentimes after I do cord cuttings with people, or people have reported with my cord sword field, is that after the cord has been cut in the astral energetic sense, there's generally almost a last hurrah or a last attempt by the other party to try to reclaim that connection back, of where people say
In the
Nobu,
physical?
like in the physical, tangible reality of where the ceremony's been done, and now an even more intense event of where the person starts lashing out or, being aggressive with the person that did the cord cutting. And the reason for this is as follows. Again, like I said about the worst thing, being a vampire, is that person now no longer has that cord to you, especially if it's sexual, to the sacral chakra, and you just cut off their supply, right? And even from a psychological level, let's look at the wordplay, like narcissistic supply, energy vampires. So again, it's coming back to that sacral energy. And when people lose their hooks in you or lose their supply, they get weaker. And they may not consciously realize that's why they're angry at you, but at a subconscious level, they realize they're losing that supply energy from another person.
Interesting. And you mentioned you have some audio and frequency cord cutting type of tools. Are there any other generally useful approaches to trying to actively cut energy cords that might exist between you and someone else?
Obsidian is my favorite stone for cord cutting. It's very much a psychic vacuum cleaner, and I love. You'll see it all the time too. Is obsidian carved into daggers or arrowheads. It actually has a sharper edge than surgical steel. obsidian.
Well,
Yeah.
very cool.
I don't find it any coincidence as well that it's so effective for the spiritual energetic work as well.
Yeah.
417 hertz frequency in terms of a pure tone or a tuning fork or a singing bowl is effective for the sacral chakra and then also for removing negative energy as well. So 417 hertz, and the last tool that anyone can use to clear themselves of past sexual partners is papaya seeds. Eat papaya, but especially eat the seeds. The seeds are a strong anti-parasitic in the physical sense, and again, like as above, so below, and they are also extremely powerful at removing cords from sexual partners.
Maybe specific question on the seeds. Are you supposed to chew them or swallow them whole?
Thank you. Chew them. Chew them. Yeah, they're going to be very bitter. You can mix it with honey and cinnamon and make it kind of like a dessert type caviar dish. But yes, chew and eat the seeds, and it's not going to be that pleasant. And one final note. Now I know we're going to be talking to more people. If you are pregnant, do not eat papaya or the seeds. It could induce labor.
Oh, interesting. As you're kind of describing the sacredness of sexuality, it got me thinking on my own life experience, right? So as a child growing up, I went to Catholic school, and the Catholic dogma was propagated, taught no sexual activity before marriage, that monogamy obviously was the foundation kind of the family unit, and the sacredness of sexuality was kind of front and center. At the time, as going through puberty as well, and then like being exposed to like movies and media and American culture, it seemed like they were diametrically opposed, and almost like the church and the school were trying to shut down the fun in my mind at the time. And it's like, oh, like they're just trying to put these rules on me and limit me from something that feels like I need to do this, right? Like the sexual urge that comes when you're a young boy going through puberty is like sometimes all encompassing, and you can't you can't shut it off in your mind. So I always figured there was a kind of this adversarial relationship between the rules being prescribed by the religious institutions versus maybe the more like freedom and free sex and drugs and rock and roll that the American media machine propagates. Wondering if you have any thoughts like kind of on that dynamic and like how it affects maybe folks that you've come across in your work, kind of doing more of this shamanic approach.
Yes, there's a reason why many, not just the Catholic Church, but also in Ayurveda and also in Taoist sexual alchemy, there is a common theme and pattern towards the sacredness, again, of sex and towards monogamy, because they know what I just talked about the chords and about the potency of that energy. They know, they're just not telling people why, which I encountered this as well as a young man of being shamed for masturbation or pornography, but then not being educated as to why I was being punished or shamed for it.
Right.
I believe it was at one point in the Bible, like where they literally talk about how like if a man spills his seed, like he's cast out of the village and he's forbidden from laying, in any of the tents. How serious it was, and the reason why, and some people might think I'm putting a tinfoil hat on, but my hat's lined with silver, is that the government and then pornography and these things that are free that encourage people to engage in senseless pleasure want you weak, right? Whereas the church, whether it realizes it consciously or not nowadays, but the intention behind that knowledge was to make people brahmacaras. I'm butchering the pronunciation in Hindu right now, but a brahmacara is someone who retains their seed and they're abstinent and they're celibate and they're on the straight and narrow path. Because again, that sexual energy is insanely powerful. It is the creative life force of the world. Some of the greatest minds that we know of were celibate and chaste. Tesla, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. I believe Einstein was during his period of greatness because, and I can go into this more. So at a denser level, right? I spoke about it before in a more esoteric, occultist viewpoint of things that people can't see, but that for men, the semen is comprised of calcium, zinc, magnesium, these denser minerals, which also is the opposite polarity as female. So again, that's also why you can't attract women in your life when you're not masculine, when you're not dense and grounded from the physiological level of having those minerals, which then translates into those more ethereal substances like ojas, tejas, jing, shi, and chen. But then when the sexual energy, the semen, is allowed to cultivate, it then can circulate up the cerebrospinal fluid. So when Jesus died at 33, they were referring to the 33 vertebrae of the spine, that sexual energy being cultivated, and on earth as it is in heaven, on earth down at the root, and then in heaven at the crown chakra. So they know, going back to the church, they were trying to teach people to cultivate their sexual energy and to keep it sacred, to prevent energy hoards, to prevent spillage and leakage, so that way they were as strong as possible. But they weren't explaining all the dots in between, which is why I think a lot of people just end up dismissing it, right? Like, how many young men just end up dismissing what the church or whatever religion they're a part of all over the world is saying as far as sexual energy, because they're not explaining the why. They're just saying, don't do this because I said so.
Right. Yeah, no, 1,000% agree on my side too. It's like if you're going to espouse these frameworks or approaches to life, maybe let's not even call them like rules and regulations or whatever, but if you're going to say, hey, you'll have a better experience if you are celibate, okay, let's take the step further and convince you as to why you would want to freely of your own accord make that choice. And if the explanation was, this is basically magic God energy that's in your body, and if you retain it and cultivate it and basically store up and build that energy, you can kind of become superhuman in a way. And like, that's a pretty compelling argument. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, when you and I were working together, you also kind of described very logically and maybe more from like an evolutionary standpoint too, of if you are retaining your seed as a man, that means that you haven't released it to impregnate your partner. So like the goal of life is to continue itself and to procreate. So like if you haven't done that yet, your body is just going to get stronger and stronger until you can make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that made a lot of sense just from like a physiological standpoint. Is like, okay, if you refrain from spilling your seed before trying to procreate, then you're just going to get stronger, like through like these kind of hormonal functions to make yourself a more attractive potential mate out there in the world of relationships and mating and whatnot. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well, as just like kind of on the more physiological level.
Yeah, and for those who, well, going back to, again, my own personal experience, the 2 times where I practiced my longest streaks of semen retention for 6 months at a time were when I had the most intense physical gains as well. Now, I also did have a limited food at the time, but I'm speaking from someone who's now consciously employed SR, semen retention, for the past 2 years now. I've been aware of it, like consciously aware of it, and understood the practice, what it is at its core. Your aura becomes stronger. Your electromagnetic biofield becomes stronger. You're going to attract more positive experiences in your life because your energy field is stronger. This also comes back to cord cutting as well. So it's harder for people to attempt to overpower you when you are so bright and you are so luminescent. So it doesn't just apply to finding a better mate. You're just going to do better in life overall, which I haven't logged the information from a scientific standpoint, but I can see the patterns of my life. Even like I broke a streak of celibacy and abstinence for 2 years, and after I broke it, my life went to shambles. I went from living rent-free in a really nice house and property to then becoming homeless and having a string of bad luck, for months following. Also, it's no coincidence, this person that I ended up laying with just called me yesterday and said jokingly that they were a vampire. So that's funny. But when people, like, and you say it yourself, the testosterone raises, prolactin goes lower. Prolactin is released after ejaculation, and prolactin makes you that post nut clarity or that sense of relief and calm that men have after ejaculation is a prolactin spike where you don't feel like doing anything. If your prolactin levels are high, you are what I would say more feminine. You're more passive. You're not taking action. Whereas when you retain, you're not getting these dopamine and prolactin spikes, right? So from the hormonal level, you haven't been satisfied yet. So you're more hungry to take action in your life and get more done.
Yeah,
Right?
and maybe that's part of the loop of maybe like the addictiveness of masturbation is like you do get that, like you're saying, that kind of relaxed feeling afterward. And if that's, I mean, I know for a lot of different reasons, like alcohol and cannabis, like people are seeking out that feeling of kind of just like a clear mind. And if that's one way to get it, then that's a path that's maybe easily available to a certain extent. But I think the math that especially with substances as well as behavior patterns, like, okay, is it worth it? Like, is all the negatives that will come along with this few moments of calm and clarity really, worth all the downsides that may result from making this into a regular habit? And like you're saying, lack of motivation over time and things like that, to be aware of that there are these other impacts that may not be readily apparent from the information that's out there right now. So maybe we talk about,
I
I
want to
mean,
talk
we're
about
both men, but
the
I was gonna
lazy
say,
versus crazy aspect real quick, brother. So, and this goes back to the food as well last week, but also for future things. So when you said about how people will take these few moments of pleasure for the clarity or clear mind, the calmness that comes with it is if I told you that human beings can live without food or water, a lot of people will immediately say that's crazy, right? That's the standard of what people will say. Furthermore, if I tell people that you know again pornography and masturbation are killing them and making them weaker, they'll also say I'm being crazy. But pornography and masturbation and also gluttony and a lot of heavy cooked foods will sedate the human organism. They will make you lazy. And I will say this, I will always rather be crazy and energetic than lazy and apathetic. But what did you want to touch on next, Armando? I just wanted to really dial in that point.
yeah, no, it's a great one to drive home, and it kind of makes you think about decisions just across the board of like what their ultimate impact is going to be. And I mean, it's also just like what your goals are. Like, I think for some people, maybe they don't have a goal to go out there and be motivated and super productive. Maybe they're in some retirement stage of their life and they're just trying to kick back and coast out the rest of their days. But I think that just to be informed on the front end, myself, I recently had a child, and so my wife and I are like trying to get our lives more structured, be more productive, create just like a better environment for our son to grow up in. So I'm trying to maximize all of the basically choices that I'm making to allow myself to be as energized and as productive as I possibly can so that I can manifest things into my physical reality with quicker speed and maybe more effectiveness. So yeah, it's definitely good to kind of drive those points home. And I was just going to say, yeah, to move on to the other side, on the female side of the spectrum, I know that we're both men, so maybe we don't have a much of
Mm-hmm.
experience to pull from on this, but you can maybe talk about, are there similar dynamics on the other side?
So, just as I want to touch on the food aspect, because the food aspect is more important for women, but then also going into the sexual component as well. Food for both genders is going to stimulate the libido strongly. So, like hot and spicy foods, onion and garlic. It's also why onion and garlic are forbidden within most Ayurvedic diets because they're extremely sexually stimulating. Makes
Hmm.
it hard. And then meat as well, again, and dairy are also very sexually stimulating. But anyways, for females, so the women receive the energy from the men. Again, when a man ejaculates inside of a woman, there is terabytes of data stored within that sperm that is being transferred to her. Even if there's no conception of a child, again, like I said, that is a very sacred, sex is sacred, and that is a very potent exchange and transfer of energy. You can see this in some women within the adult industry, how you can see the look in their eyes, how I want to say vapid or voidic they have become. You can see the lack of light in their eyes from all the negativity and energy they've had to transmute, right? A woman can also, by proxy, if she's with a loving man who is engaging with her sexually, she can get younger. I have witnessed it in the past with female partners I've had where after sex, I was ready to take a nap of where they were energized by the experience. Again, in reference to what I said about vampirism, it's an energy exchange. Men give up their sexual energy, their jing, to the female during sex if they ejaculate. And so the women have a greater potential if they are being wise in their sexual partners to actually gain from that interaction. But however, conversely, women can benefit greatly from that vibrational experience of sex, the friction. They also have men's season menstruation once a month, where they don't have a choice, or at least they don't think they do in modern society, as to whether or not they bleed out jing and then experience hormonal issues. But I'm here to say that menstruation is also not necessary. That has been a modern lie that has been established as a truth. If a female has optimal diet and exercise, menstruation will not occur. I've seen this within both the frugivore and the carnivore communities, of where women reach a level of health to where they're no longer experiencing the mood swings and hormonal imbalance or even menopausal symptoms. I don't know as much about the female side, but I suspect it's also, again, has to do with that imbalance of the energies, and it's the body attempting to purge itself. Whereas I do think as well for men, a lot of times when they are just seeking to, again, masturbate, and because again, like you said, they don't know where to move that energy, so the body is just trying to do what is easiest, the path of least resistance to clear itself. And perhaps for females, that menstruation is, the path of least resistance. So also for women, a lock that can be opened by any key is a terrible lock, whereas a key that can open any lock is an amazing key. How this applies energetically as well is, like I said, the female is the mater, the mother, the again, the receiving end of the energy, like Mother Earth receives the energy from the sun, right? And again, and the nature of relationships as well, the female receives the DNA, the pattern, the pater from the male. So going back to the whole lock key thing, the reason why, generally speaking, it's not judgment, it's pattern recognition, but across the world, we can see that a female with less sexual partners is more desirable than one, with a ton, is because there is that greater cleanliness. She has not had multiple men imprint her with data. Also, and then again, energy cords as well. People aren't consciously aware of this, right? They're not consciously aware of the fact that a more promiscuous woman has more energy cords, but at a subconscious level, everyone knows what's up.
Yeah.
I know I'm being very controversial here, but no bull with Nobu. Take it or leave it. So, conversely speaking, I've been with over 20 women, and I can tell a woman when I'm first talking to her, I can tell her that what my body count is, and that won't adversely affect my level of attraction for her. She won't lose attraction because she knows I've been with a lot of females. Because again, that shows, going back to that, the man who's able to reproduce a lot is highly desirable, right? That shows a high level of fertility and desirability. Again, big difference between someone who's slept with a lot of women and someone who's masturbated a lot. That's completely different, right? One is showing a high degree of sexual value and energy. The other one is showing a lack of purpose and drive. So that also is, I want to tie that in because people will try to make the sexes the same, but they're not. Just like the sun and the moon are completely different energies. You know, the the sun has the heat. The sun is supposed to produce and provide. The moon does not do the same function. Mother Earth, these feminine energies do not have the same function. So we're not trying to stick round pegs in square holes.
What kind of came into my head as you were describing that, it's like this movement of like more sexual empowerment, and like, you know, maybe it's a double standard, kind of almost evolutionarily or based in how our species evolved, and the male is that one that's head of the tribe. And I mean, I think in the ape world, they're the ones that are fathering all of the children across the entire population of that tribe. So it's like, yeah, it's a double standard, but it's kind of based in physiological reasoning and like necessity to a certain extent. Whereas like the male gets stronger with more exposure, whereas the woman doesn't. And like the push maybe on a societal level to want to have equality, while I think is a noble idea and goal, generally speaking, especially around things like equal pay for equal work, that makes sense. But when you're saying like you should have just as much kind of sexual ambition, then perhaps there's some negative consequences associated with that that are
Mm-hmm.
worthy of considering before fully embracing that lifestyle.
Yeah, and then also too, just going back to the physiological level, again, higher levels of testosterone and androgens, which that's a whole nother topic we can go over androgens in the future. Testosterone, higher levels of testosterone is going to make, again, more productive, denser bones, thicker body hair. Which again, what are dense bones good for? What is a broader frame good for? For physical labor and warfare and hunting and production, etc. So just how, again, you wouldn't expect a female, to go into a UFC cage with me and it be a fair fight, right? It's not fair. But the polarity exists for a different reason. And again, just to play, so people don't think I'm sounding like a misogynist here, play a devil's advocate to myself. I wish I could be an attractive female to where men just want to literally give me their money just for the chance to sleep with me. I mean, that would be a fantastic place to be. Again, the feminine, the mater receives. That is their job. Is again, it's a double-edged sword, like we said. Like, you know, be careful what you're receiving, ladies. Right? Be careful. But that's a great place to be. The feminine energy is cherished, right? Men love women for who they are. We as men value the feminine just for its inherent beauty, whereas the feminine love the masculine for what they can produce, protect, and provide. Again, this is what it is, and people don't like it. Well, send me a message. We can hash it out. But like that, it is what it is. And to say otherwise is just playing word games and engaging in propaganda. But yes, this is
Right.
this is quite literally. And again, there are exceptions to every rule. Again, there are shades along this rainbow. But for the most part, this is the way of the world, and the way of our physiologically and also our spirituality. That was why I was very intentional in going to that cosmic layer as well.
Yeah, no, I can definitely validate the truth behind that as far as the roles that myself and my wife have really leaned into and found success raising our son. He's 4 months old now, so still learning and figuring it out. But like my role to be the provider and to be the one going out there and bringing the things back to the house. Well, it's money in the current day and age, but like, the money then creates the ability to get the food, get the shelter, get the water, get the comforts and luxuries and things like that to make life more comfortable for them. And then she's really been stepping into that role of the nurturer, providing that love and support and kind of intimate connection, with our son to make him feel safe on that more like emotional and spiritual level as well. And that's something that I mean, maybe I could fill that role to a certain extent, but definitely not to the level that she is able to just day in and day out. So it's been nice to have those more traditional gender roles, which I maybe in the past would have rejected, have them be more of like a guiding framework to have life be a little bit more clear and structured and successful. So
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, I think I'm gonna wind this one down because we're coming up on about double our normal time, but I think it was worth it. I think it was definitely worth it. And we'll listen to our audience. They said they wanted a little bit longer format, so we'll keep extending it maybe for certain episodes as we were feeling inspired and give the people what they want. But any last themes or thoughts you want to leave us with, Nobu?
You are what you eat, the company you keep, with whom you sleep, and the music to which you beat.
Good reminder. Thank you again, Nobu, for taking the time to share your perspectives with us, myself, and the audience. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you next time, everybody. Thanks for listening.